Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's WWX webinar titled How to Cultivate Compassion. And quick, the UE has chosen to highlight anti-bullying throughout schools around the country. The UE National Bullying Prevention Week, as it's called, is aimed at sending a clear and positive message that bullying is unacceptable in our schools and communities. Bullying is a crucial issue that is still common and so important to address in schools. Not only during this week's different workshops and webinars, but also throughout the school year, it is important to discuss with children what bullying actually is. This way they everyday life and understand why it's wrong. Bullying is any deliberate behavior that is done to hurt or upset someone over an ongoing period of time. Bullying can be done by an individual or a group of people in many ways. This includes verbal bullying, whereby someone is hurt through vicious words, name calling, or statements. Physical bullying occurs when perpetrators physically cause harm to another person. This type of bullying can vary from pushing, shoving, to kicking, slapping, or punching. This makes it the easiest form of bullying to identify and confront. In contrast, cyberbullying is one of the most challenging forms to see and prevent. When acting through the internet, smartphones, and social media, perpetrators can remain anonymous, whilst victims, they suffer in silence. In today's webinar, we wish to welcome two ladies from Jumeirah Baccalaureate, who will share their well-established framework of policies, which have been established to create a safe and kind and inclusive environment for their students. But before we welcome our ladies, I wish to invite you to log on to menti.com for a quick icebreaker to test the room. So if everyone could please log on to menti.com, and I will put the code here in the chat. Just give me a couple of seconds here. You have the code there, 72815034, and I will share my screen as well. Second here. There we go. I hope everyone can see that. So the first question, what was your biggest fear before you started school? So what was your biggest fear before you started school? A couple of seconds to answer that. Was it, for instance, not fitting in potentially, or not feeling smart enough, or fearful of not making any friends? What was your biggest fear before you started school? And you also see the Menti code up there in the corner, 72815034. Not knowing anyone, absolutely. I think that goes for most of us. Being new in school, not making friends. Socialization aspect, fitting in, absolutely. Not finding friends and feeling left out, absolutely. Grateful for those answers. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. I'm now okay. We got reconnecting with everyone. Absolutely. Any last takers here? Thank you for those answers. Unfamiliar place. Just going to stop sharing my screen. Appreciate that. Okie dokie. Thank you for those answers, and I do recommend all of you stay on to menti.com, as we will return to Menti towards the end of this webinar for a few wrap-up questions. But now I wish to welcome to the stage Leonie Riley. She is the pastoral leader, secondary physical education and mathematics teacher, and Ashley Eaton. She's also a physical education teacher for grade 7, grade 8 leader, and their presentation. Over to you, ladies. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Magnus says, my name is Leonie Riley.
And I'm Ashley Eaton.
So I'm the secondary pastoral leader at Jumeirah Baccalaureate School, teacher of PE and maths, and I've been teaching for 14 years, 10 of which have been in the UAE.
So I'm a teacher of PE. I'm also a grade leader here at JPS. This is my 13th year of teaching, and 3 of those have been in the UAE. So I think we're just going to share our presentation with you now. So if you bear with us a second.
Okay, so we're here to talk to you a little bit about what we do in JPS in order to cultivate compassion and camaraderie, and also to minimise the amount of bullying that we see. So Jumeirah Baccalaureate School, we are located in the heart of Jumeirah 1. That's an aerial view of our school there. We're an IB curriculum school, going all the way from pre-K up to grade 12. We are a truly international school, representing over 76 nationalities. However, our biggest cohort is from Emiratis, who account for 30% of our whole student population, with our second biggest population of students coming from France. We have 1,101 students on roll, 665 in the primary school and 436 in the secondary school.
So I think one of the first things to talk about when we're talking about bullying is actually the ethos of your school and what is happening in your school. So about 3 years ago, we really started to identify that actually teaching character to our students and what good character is was actually having a benefit to us and a benefit to the behaviours that we were seeing in school. So we actually looked out of the UAE and found the Jubilee Centre in the UK, which actually offered a programme called Schools of Character. What we had to do is go through an application process and show how we were teaching our students good character. And through this, we got awarded Kite Mark, and we were the first international school to gain this. So what this really did for us is really allow us as staff to look at how are we teaching our students to do the right thing, even when no one is watching, because that really is the definition of good character. So we started a character and action initiative that really tried to focus on what the main areas or the main character traits were that we wanted to teach our students. And we came up with the 4 R's, which was responsibility, respect, resourcefulness, and resilience. So through this, we started to look at how would this then look in the wider picture of how our students behave towards one another. So responsibility, for example, I am accountable for my actions and stand up for what is right. So this then meant if students were being unkind to each other, using poor language towards one another, we could come back to our 4 R's and say, are you being responsible for your actions now? What are you choosing to do? And we could also encourage our students that if they saw this type of behaviour, are they challenging it? Are they saying to their friends, that's not nice, you shouldn't be doing that? And then we also looked at the idea of respect. I treat myself and others and the environment well. And again, we were able to look at what does society expect from us, what does the school community expect from us, and how can we make sure we're being respectful from that. And what we decided to do is we linked all of these 4 R's right through our curriculum as well. These are linked into every unit of work and every lesson. So each lesson that we teach to our students is related to one of these 4 R's. So we're consistently teaching our students what good character is, and we're consistently looking at them to take responsibility for their actions and also to show respect to each other. However, with this being said, we also need to make sure that we have some form of anti-bullying policy. And it's really important to us as a school that we have this, because it gives every member of our school information, and every member of our school is able to know what the expectation is. So whether that's students, staff or parents, with the anti-bullying policy, everyone is able to come back to it and see whether their behaviour has been acceptable or not. So the policies really set our expectations, and what we have to do is we have to make sure that we're consistently and constantly updating them. We're seeing over the last year especially, there is a lot of new types of bullying that's happening, mainly online, but we're also seeing new technology being used, and we're seeing new language being used that may not have been around when we were that age. So by updating our policy constantly, it means that we're never really caught off guard, which is really important. I think one of the things that JPS does really well is that every member of staff has to read our anti-bullying policy, and they have to sign to say that they not only understand the policy, but they will uphold the policy. So if they see any of these types of bullying happen, they will step in, they will challenge, they will send that student to the right person for it to be further investigated. So I think for every school, an anti-bullying policy is really important. And the one that is on the screen now is an example of the one that we use here at JPS. So moving on, what do we do to prevent bullying? Well, we talked a little bit of being a school of character. So we have the Character in Action initiative. We also have what's called a Character in Action reading list. We really encourage our students to understand what it means to be respectful, what it means to be responsible. So we look for different types of literature that we can get our students to read to give them different examples of this. And we're actually currently in the process of looking for what we call character leaders, and they are going to apply. Students will apply to be these, and we will allow them to run certain events, and they will be role models to our other students. Being an IB learner school as well, we have IB learner profiles, and you can see, we have things like caring, balanced, open-minded, being a communicator. All of these things tie into our students being able to come and speak to us as staff, being able to speak to one another, and that really is the foundation of the school as well. I think one of the more challenging areas of preventing bullying with our school is that we are a positive reinforcement school. Quite often, positive reinforcement people can find challenging because we really look for how can we highlight the positive behaviour rather than punishing the poor behaviour. This can become challenging sometimes, but we really believe that by enhancing positive behaviours, it's showing those students who have maybe chose a negative behaviour that actually choosing the positive path reaps more rewards. They actually get further by being praised for positive than us punishing them for negative. So that really is a basic basis of our school here.
Okay, so there are many ways in which as a school we promote positive well-being, as we really believe that if a student is happy and feels like they're in a safe and positive environment, then they're going to be less likely to display negative behaviours and to be abusive or in any way unkind to others around them. So by promoting this, we do feel like it's going to increase the overall well-being of everybody and therefore decrease the chance of any bullying situations happening. And we believe that one of our main strengths in promoting positive well-being is the level of communication which we have throughout our school community. So the first port of pastoral care for our students is the homeroom teachers. So these are the teachers that the students see every single morning. The students that the students and the teachers would probably have the most positive relationship from anybody else because they're the only teacher that they get to see every single day in the secondary school. These homeroom teachers are led by the grade leaders such as Ashley, and this group meet on a weekly basis in order to discuss any challenges or any concerns we have with any of the students within the different grade groups. These grade leaders then meet with myself, our inclusion team, our school counsellor and our curriculum coordinators on a weekly basis in order to feed back the results from those meetings and again discuss as a group what we can do to support any students of concerns that have arisen. So as you can see, our support network is just highlighted here. So as I already said, the homeroom teachers, the grade leaders and the pastoral leader. We also have the school counsellor who has a different approach to offering support than the pastoral leader, grade leaders and homeroom teachers. And then further to that, we have student leaders who again offer another different type of support that the school counsellor and the teachers do not offer. So they would be the people who maybe students would feel more comfortable with, maybe students can relate further to, and maybe really understand probably more than us in this day and age what it feels like to be a teenager or a young person in these times. And then those student leaders form part of our student-led school council, again, which they meet on a fortnightly basis in order to discuss any concerns that have been raised by our student body. So it makes the students feel like they have a voice, they're empowered, they're listened to. And sometimes this school council comes up with initiatives and ideas to support positive wellbeing and to prevent bullying that were not thought of by the teachers because they maybe have an idea to do with a new type of technology or something like this that we're not familiar with. So we feel like this support network and our level of communication between all of those factors that you see on your screen there is really one of our biggest strengths. So as well as having this support network, we really do use the PASS and device student wellbeing sensors to identify how we are doing as a school and to measure our progress with regards to how our students feel about themselves, how they feel about school, and how they feel about their relationships. So we've actually just completed the device student wellbeing census recently, but we don't have the very recent results of these. But in a moment, I will share with you the results we have over the last few years when we've been doing this survey. So as soon as the students have sat this survey and we're able to see the results, we sit down as a pastoral group and we analyse the key findings. And based on what we find, we then create initiatives, and we have a homeroom curriculum in which we create lessons in order to address the key improvement areas to try and raise the standards. So I'm just going to flick over to an example of some of our data from the PASS, which is the pupils' attitudes to self and school. So if you look at the self-regard as a learner and the confidence in learning, you'll see compared to the other scores, it's actually our lowest scoring areas, and these are both related to the confidence of the students. So we've recognised that our students have low confidence in their learning ability, and we do understand that when a student has low confidence, it can lead to low levels of effort, or it can lead to them trying to distract themselves away from doing the work in the lesson, which again can lead to negative behaviours. So we've, during the homeroom lessons, we've been working on learning skills in order to raise the confidence of our students, in order to give them a more positive self-worth. This is also then going to create a more positive classroom environment, which then again would probably lead to a more positive outcome and no negative behaviours. You also see that two of our highest scoring areas are the feelings about the school and college and the attitude to teachers. So this is really important to us, that students feel happy to come to school every day and they feel they have positive relationships with their teachers. So if there were any negative behaviours going on, they would feel comfortable to come to one of the adults in school and report that. So this next slide shows us some results from the Dubai Student Wellbeing census, and this one is all to do with positive relationships. These are so important, not just to prevent bullying, but as I've just mentioned, for the students to feel really comfortable to come to an adult to talk about any situations that they're going through or any situations that they feel might be arising. As you can see from the two middle bar charts, our students actually feel almost as connected to the adults at school as they do to their adults at home, which I think really promotes the fact that JPS is a school that really cares about their student bodies, and that our teachers really do care about the students and make them feel comfortable enough that they're able to share any problems and concerns that they have. This next set of data talks about how the students feel about being in school. So it's very important to us here that students feel like the JPS community is one in which they belong. So if they were to ever feel alone or isolated, this could be the result of bullying or could lead to the students themselves showing some negative behaviours. So we are very happy with the fact that most of our students feel like they belong, and most of all that they feel really safe in the school. So again, this is an attribute to the fact that we really do have all of these different initiatives in place in order to promote positive wellbeing. Okay, so this next set of data is to do with bullying itself. So it's actually quite interesting that if you look at the first 3 bar charts from the left side in, we'll see that the areas of absence of physical, verbal and social bullying, the absence of this has actually increased over the past 4 years, meaning that it's less prevalent. However, if you look at the furthest right data, it shows that actually this is decreased over time, and this is to do with cyberbullying, and this is really evident with the fact the issues that me and Ashley are dealing with almost on a weekly basis that is becoming more and more prevalent with the use of social media and the access that students these days have to these forms of different technologies. So it is something that we have an increasing problem with. But we're going to talk more about that a little later. But as you can see from the data, again, we are happy that the majority of our students are feeling little to no physical, verbal or social bullying. And even though the cyberbullying has increased over time, we still feel that the results are pleasing, but as always, we can do better. So just to continue with how we're promoting the positive wellbeing. So the important relationships with the students, how much we actually care about this is actually affected the way that we treat the hiring of new staff into the school. So we realize that students will do things for people, not because they want to get the best results. So if they have a teacher that they have a really good relationship with, they're going to try their hardest in lessons in order to make that teacher happy because they have such a positive relationship with them. So when we went to hiring of new staff, we started to look as our first priority that a teacher should have a personality that was warm and engaging and that would really gel with the student bodies that we have in JPS. So we thought that as our first priority before looking at the other areas that make a really good teacher. But we really wanted somebody who really cares for students, and I think that has really positively affected the level of well-being in our schools since we changed the priorities for hiring our teachers. Our student leaders have also been a really great initiative, not just to empower the students themselves, but the ideas that they've brought forward to help us as teachers has been brilliant. The ideas that they come up with are so good, and all of these whole school initiatives that they lead, and these like weekly activities and events that they put on are really brilliant. And then, of course, our regular homeschool contact. We really are a 3-way community with the teacher, the parents and the students. We really triangulate all of those areas to make sure that we have the best communication possible, and everybody is really involved in every step of the way in that process. So we just have a couple of examples here. This is something we did for World Mental Health Day. Again, while I say that we did, this was completely led by our student council and our student leaders. They took on this initiative of how we could promote positive wellbeing amongst our school community. And we also had the student leaders leading an anti-bullying campaign. And we have some examples of grade 6 students here who created posters to display around school in order to promote the week, which was Anti-Bullying Week.
Okay, so we're just going to move on to now with how we actually handle bullying situations at JPS. So I think one of the first things to really highlight is something that Leonie said earlier about having those teacher-student relationships. We find that with our students, the best way to move forward with them is if they feel like they've been heard. So we really make sure to sit down with all the students involved separately and really listen to their story, because if they feel like they're being heard and being understood, they're more likely to tell the truth, and we really encourage that here. Once we have got all sides of the story, we then really challenge the students on why they've chosen to behave the way they have and what impact they think that behaviour has had on another person. And then we inform parents and we put an action plan together with ourselves, the student and the parents of how we will move forward. So when we're in these situations where maybe somebody is being bullied, it's also really important for us to let our staff know, because they're really the people who are in the corridors, in the classrooms, are walking around at break times. They're really the people that can be watchful and maybe hear things or talk to students. So we make sure that they're aware of it, so they can also, in classrooms, if there's a situation between two particular students, they don't put them in a group together, they sit them at separate sides of the classroom until the situation is resolved. And we really do try and resolve the situation here. We are a positive reinforcement school, so we do something that is called restorative justice meetings. That means that we bring all of the parties involved into a meeting and we allow the students the opportunity to express how they feel. So, for example, the student who feels like they have been bullied, they are allowed to express their feelings, and the person who has been accused of bullying has to sit and listen without commenting, and then they are given the opportunity to express their feelings. And it's really a moment of acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement of the actions. It's an acknowledgement of how you've made that other person feel. Then at the end of the restorative justice meeting, we create an agreement between the students where they identify how they are going to move forward. So, for example, the student that feels they have been bullied, what do they need from the person who's bullied them to move forward? What is the expectation in the future? And in these agreements as well, we also really make sure that we set clear boundaries, that if this situation happens again, this is what will happen. And we really use our anti-bullying policy to help regulate that. And we have a clear system that goes from grade leader to lead pastoral, which is Leonie, then moves up to the head of secondary. And we really have a process that we follow. When it comes to the actual bully specifically, we also really make sure that we involve the counsellor. We involve the counsellor for all students, but with the bully in particular, quite often these behaviours come from somewhere, whether it is they've witnessed something, whether they have bad feelings about themselves and they are using they're picking on somebody else to make themselves feel better. They usually really stem from something. So it's really important for us that that student who is bullying someone, we get them involved with our school counsellor and we find out why it's happening. And then the grade leader really monitors the situation, keeps an eye on the students, and we make sure that we're checking in with all involved. But again, leading back to something that Leonie said, it really is a three-way process, and we make sure that we keep the parents involved at all times. We keep our staff involved with the teachers and the homeroom staff, and also with the grade leaders are really involved heavily in everything.
So we've not really had any incidents of physical bullying in our school, so we don't really feel like we can include that in our presentations. It's something that we're not familiar with, so we're very lucky in that account. But we're just going to touch on a couple of areas that we do have some issues with. So we have the verbal bullying, and this comes into two different types: the offensive language used towards a peer, so student to student, and then offensive language used towards a teacher. So we've got lots of problems recently with students using verbal language that they're calling a joke. So it's usually something that they've seen on the internet or witnessed on a TV show maybe, and then they're trying to reenact these things to other people. So the biggest thing we're trying to combat at the moment is getting the students to understand that even though something that is a joke to you can actually be really hurtful or shameful to another person. Sometimes I try and say to the students, imagine if an adult walked into the room and said that to you, how would that make you feel? So trying to put them in another situation, because if I say to them, oh, what if they said that to you? They'd be like, oh, well, it's just a joke. So you've got to try and make them look at it in a different situation. For example, trying to use, what if this adult walked into the room now and spoke to you in that way? How would that make you feel? We've also got some students who are quite young using highly inappropriate words that after lots of investigation, we realized they don't even know the meaning of these words, but they've been on these websites, or they've been on YouTube, or they've been playing games online, and they hear these words, and then they go and then they repeat these words. And we'll get the child and we'll sit them down and we'll say, well, we know that you said this, what does this word mean? And they'll just be like, oh, I don't know, I heard it. And trying to get them to understand, sometimes it's very difficult, actually explaining to them what that word means and how somebody would feel. And most of the time they're completely shocked and devastated when they understand what they've actually said. So this is something that, again, links to the internet and the technology these days, but really getting them to understand exactly what they've said, what it meant, and how it would have made the other person feel. So this is a challenge. And then with the offensive language used towards a teacher, this is a very rare occasion that it happens, but it often does happen with teenagers who are very angry, maybe a decision that's been made, and they're just speaking before they think. So in this situation, we also need to make sure that the member of staff that this has been directed towards feels safe, feels listened to, and that the teacher and the student have had time to calm down after a situation such as offensive language being used towards a member of staff has happened. So usually we would ask maybe the student to stay home for a couple of days just to give everybody the time in order to reset themselves. And then on return to school, there would be another restorative justice meeting where the teacher involved, the student, the parents, and the head of the school will all sit together, giving that student that made that mistake with that language the chance to understand where they were going to. And usually they're very verbal, and after they've had the couple of days to calm down, very blunt with their feelings, very expressive of what they were feeling that day. And it's a really nice way to build that relationship again in order to move forwards.
So moving on to social media and cyberbullying, we've found recently that this is a weekly occurrence for us that we are dealing with. And I think one of the biggest things is, with the likes of Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, if it's happening outside of school, is it school's issue? Should school be dealing with that? Now, in our anti-bullying policy, it says if it is affecting the student in our school and if it is bringing our school into disrepute, then as a school, we will deal with the situation. So you have to also be really clear about what the guidelines say in your school and make sure you're following those policies. Specifically for us, we are having a lot of issues with Snapchat. A lot of our students are creating groups in Snapchat and they're having conversations. And again, one of the difficulties is that we're a no mobile phone school, so they have to keep them in their lockers or in their bags. So a lot of this is happening outside, but we have to make sure that we are being proactive in helping prevent it. So the first thing that we do is we reach out to all the parents and we express that, social media apps such as Snapchat, TikTok, you have to be 13 years of age to have. So for us, for example, in grade 6 and grade 7, where a lot of these issues are starting to appear, our students aren't even actually old enough to have these apps. But a lot of our parents don't know this, they don't use them. So we really try and educate everybody in our school community to make sure that we understand how these apps can be used, what age you need to be to use them. And we really ask for the support. We also look at, Leonie said earlier, our homeroom lessons have a lot of cyberbullying awareness, and we do a lot of education there as well. Specifically, some of the issues that we've had is, again, linking to what Leonie said. We have a lot of students that are on gaming sites, they're on different websites that they've never been before. They see a lot of things that they don't really understand. So a lot of language that's being used in these conversations is extremely inappropriate, but they also don't understand what they're saying. So I have screenshots of, a student saying certain comments, and as soon as I put those screenshots in front of them, they are mortified when I then explain what those words mean. And they also don't expect anybody else to see them. And I think for me as a grade leader, when I have these conversations, it's really important to teach our students that you may think that this is private, but if you are on a group that has 30 people, do you trust every single person in that group not to share the conversations that you are having? Just because it is on a a group chat or it is on Snapchat that's meant to disappear, these things don't actually disappear. So I always say to them, if you don't want your parent to see something, don't write it or don't share it. And I think having those conversations is really important. But specifically, if we have a student who is using Snapchat or TikTok inappropriately, as soon as we have evidence of that, we bring the student in and we have a conversation with them. We then bring the parents in, and depending on the severity of the situation, again, like Leonie said earlier, we might ask the student to take a couple of days at home to have a think of about what they've said or what they've done, and then we bring them back in for a restorative justice meeting. One of the areas that we do feel like we have an extreme responsibility to is Microsoft Teams, which is a piece of software that we use in school for uploading work, or especially through the online period. It's where we taught all our online lessons. There is a function on this called Microsoft Teams Chat, and we found that, we are a device school. A lot of our students use devices in lessons. We found that they were having conversations over this Teams chat in lessons that were inappropriate. It was preventing them from working. So the first thing that we did was speak to the students in an assembly addressing the issue. We gave them a chance to improve on the behaviour because, again, we are a positive reinforcement school. We want to give that opportunity. Then when the behaviour continued, we had another assembly where they were told that the Microsoft Teams chat was disabled. So then we now disable that chat, and they're now earning back the right to have that Microsoft Teams chat on their computers. So we do really look at challenging these behaviours, and we really do try and have the conversations with the students because, again, quite often they are not understanding where the issue is. So that isn't the main part for us, I think.
So I just wanted to touch also on our experience of the effects of the pandemic and how that's affected our student wellbeing. So we know that school is so important for the development of a child, not just because they learn maths and science and the whole range of subjects, but because the school is a chance that you really develop your social skills. So we were in the lockdown, so there were a good 4 or 5 months of school that we were online. Then we had the summer holidays, so it was 6 months before we came back to full-time school a year last September. But for the whole of the last academic year, the students could choose, well, the parents could choose to keep the students at home for online learning right up until October of this year. And there were actually quite a large percentage of our students that chose to do the online learning, or lots that were going back and forward between the two different platforms. So we're noticing that our students have actually had what looks like 2 years worth of online learning, where they have not had the chance to develop their social skills and learn how to build relationships. So the grade group that we're having that this has had the most negative effects on is our current grade 6 students. So at the moment, I would say that they've got the social skills and the interaction skills of a grade 4 cohort. However, they're in the secondary school. They've got this freedom of moving about the school. They've got to get themselves to the lessons. They've got this technology that they use in lessons, and we're really trying to work on getting them to behave more responsibly, as we feel like they've been given lots of freedom but don't yet have the maturity levels to deal with it. And we believe that this is just because of the 2 years that the effect of the pandemic has on them developing in maturity through the social skills and relationships that they're able to build in school. Yeah, so we are really aware of this effect of the pandemic. It's something that we are kind of every day fighting to try and recuperate what we've missed from before. But yeah, it's definitely something that has really affected us here in school.
Yeah. Okay, so just lastly from me, we're just going to talk about how JPS is a school of inclusivity. So I think, again, this leads back to our, character 4 R's of respect. We really do try and make sure that our students understand that respect is the foundation, that we respect everybody in our school and we treat everybody equally. So we really not try and normalise if we have learning support assistants that maybe come in and pull students out, or they come in into lessons to support other students. We really make them a part of the class, and we really make sure that our students understand why maybe other students need extra help and why it's important that we support them, because by supporting them, we're helping them move forward. And we also really try and encourage this idea of creating a community and school spirit. So again, we celebrate our differences. We actually make a point of discussing our differences. And this is really prevalent in the fact that we have 2 primary Inspire classes, which is a focus class on SEND students, and then we recently have just added a Aspire class in the secondary, which again is focused on SEND students. So the Inspire and Aspire student have separate lessons, but then they join the mainstream classes where possible. So for example, PE, performing or visual arts. And you know, we have a very much community feel. So as students are moving around, we encourage all of our students to talk to different grades, to different classes, and really try and make those connections. And I think that as a teacher, for me, what's really important is communication. So quite often you'll have experiences where you'll have a student ask a question about a SEND student, and you'll hear an adult maybe try and shush or quiet, or we'll talk about it later. I think it's actually really important to be open and honest about that question and answer it in real time, because questions are how students learn, and I think questions are also how they understand. And quite often when it comes to our SEND students and questions are being asked, people feel like, oh, I don't want to be rude, but actually you're not being rude, you're trying to understand. And that's really important for us as a school, that we have that understanding. So being really open and actually encouraging those questions is a really positive move in my perspective. And I think also working with your colleagues, sharing what information works and what does not, so you feel confident having those conversations, is really important.
Okay, so that is coming to the end of our presentation there. So we've just got a few websites here that we found really useful. There's lots of different resources and more information on there. So there's obviously lots of resources out there, but we just suggested a few here to help you with any further guidance and information. So that's all from us. So we'll pass back over to Magnus, who I'm sure is going to come back with your questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to see if we have any questions being posed here, but otherwise we're going to move on to the Q&A aspect of this webinar, and we do encourage all of you to pose your questions to Leonie and Ashley. You can use the live chat feature there on the right hand side, but in the meantime I will go through some of the pre-submitted questions that have been sent in. Ladies, it was a wonderful presentation, very in-depth. You covered many areas. When it comes to, we have a question here regarding social media, and of course you've delved quite heavily into social media. Social media is of course everywhere and in our lives 24/7, you know, and we've talked about the age limit there. You mentioned the age of 18 for Snapchats and so forth. And could you please potentially share with us what are the parents' views on having such an age sort of limit as such? You know, how has that dialogue happened?
Well, when we found that there were numerous different cases coming to us of inappropriate things happening online, we actually contacted every single parent within the grade to let them know that this was happening, that it's probably on your child's device and you don't even know about it, and that there was this age limit for these apps. So we urged every single parent to go to check all of their students' devices and to check if they had these applications on, and if they did, to delete them immediately, because first of all, they're not old enough, and second of all, they are not using it responsibly. So we did actually have quite a bit of feedback from parents saying thank you so much for making making us aware of this. I had no idea. Because the thing is, with something like Snapchat, for example, the messages, they disappear. So even if me and Ash had a conversation, which was terrible, there'd be no evidence of it because these messages just go, which is what I find is probably the most dangerous, because you know, these screenshots are what we use to go forwards to, you know, for consequences with these students that are not behaving responsibly. So we did actually have like a really positive feedback from the parents, from the students, not so much. They were like, why did you do that? My parent got rid of it. And we were like, good.
I think just adding on to what Leonie said as well from the parents, what was really interesting is that a lot of the parents didn't understand Snapchat and they didn't understand Instagram, they didn't understand any of it. So for us as well, we're doing follow-up now in after the winter break. We're going to have a meeting with all the parents online, and we're going to do some educational, this is what Snapchat is, this is how it works, this is how you can monitor your child online. And we actually sent out a load of websites as well of like, go and research the internet, this is what everything is. And again, the response to that was really positive.
Fantastic, thank you. We have a question here from one of our audience members. What are the best ways to encourage teachers and advisors to use positive reinforcement more often? I
think that building teachers' confidence. So I think, you know, professional development, having people that are in your school that are good behaviour managers, people that are in your school who do demonstrate positive behaviour reinforcement, get them to lead professional development for the rest of the school, and really
I think we lost the sound there. I did it. Yeah.
Sorry. Really try and encourage staff to lead those sessions so other staff can benefit from their knowledge. And I genuinely, for me, feel confidence in the teacher building their own confidence, because it can be quite daunting if you've got, say, for example, a grade 12 boy who is being disruptive in your lesson and you automatically just want to tell them to stop. But I think that building their confidence to maybe look at that situation and redirect it and say to this other student, thank you so much for, you know, following the instructions, that's been so helpful for me, instead of straight away looking for that bad behaviour. I think that's the most important thing, is building the staff confidence.
Yeah, as soon as, because it really does work. So as soon as they start to use it, as soon as children just want attention, they really want attention. So if they're going to get it easily from you with a negative behaviour, they're going to go negative. But then when they see you're just ignoring them, no matter how much they push, but instead you're giving all your attention to the student representing good, they're going to think, what do I need to do to get their attention? And then they do change their behaviours. It takes time, but it's worth it in the end.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to positive socializations. You know, what are your reflections on creating specific strategies to assist with positive socializations of students post-pandemic? You did mention there that you have especially grade 6 students who've suffered, you know, who struggle a bit moving into secondary school, and particularly as well with new students coming into the school. It's a brand new environment for most of them. What sort of direct remedies have you put in place, you know, and can you share some of them to support these students?
I think for me personally, I'm over grade 7 and 8, and grade 7 have really been impacted by this. They tend to, instead of dealing with situations when they've had a falling out face to face, they wait till they go home and they go on Snapchat and they have an argument over Snapchat. And so for me as grade leader, we've actually within our homerooms have started implementing different scenarios. So in a morning, they'll be given a scenario that says, I don't know, if Leonie falls out with Ashley because of this, what would her reaction be? And then the students have a debate about what should they do. And then the homeroom teacher really navigates through that and tries to encourage the positive way of dealing with the situation. So we have different scenarios in homerooms that they discuss. We also try within grade 7 at the moment that if we see something happening, we straight away as a member of staff go in and intercept and say, okay, what's happening here? Okay, let's try and talk it out. And we really try and encourage that conversation. And we, again, in the homeroom sessions and we have middle year programs, lessons, again, we're doing different socialisation lessons in those as well.
Yeah, we've also now back at our school restarted our extracurricular activity programme. So there are lots of opportunities for the students to interact and have those interactions they haven't had pre-pandemic. So for 2 years they've been missing this sort of social skills that they can build at like a sports club and things like this. And so we've really encouraged participation in that, and it's actually been a huge take up. We have before school activities, after school activities, and with our new students, the ones that had been online for so long, we made sure that we had a buddy system. So they had one student who was a long-standing member of the school to help them to settle in after the pandemic.
Yeah, and just adding on, we recently just came back from camp. So grades 6, 7 and 8 went away for 2 nights on a camp, and we took them and they did team building activities, they slept in tents, they had to put their own tents up, and that was also a really positive experience because they had to work with each other in a way that they've not had to do for nearly 2 years, and that was really interesting to watch, and those experiences are so important.
Thank you. We have a question here. How can parents help us fight bullying? If we can sort of just build on that a little bit, you did talk about, you know, the situation where you essentially sort of the inquiry stage. You know, you're a positive reinforcement school, and you know you did mention that you ask both the bullied child and the bully himself to sign a form of a contract or whatever. How receptive have your parents been to such a contract, and how can you sort of how much leg room do you have in this model, and how effective is it? You know, because particularly when you have repeat offenders, for instance, you know, and how have parents reacted to that model, and how do you think overall about the structure? Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is identifying whether it's bullying. So there's a lot of our students that they have a disagreement and they will say, I'm being bullied. And I'll say, well, are you being bullied, or has this person been unkind to you this time? And they'll go, well, they've been unkind to me. And I'll say, well, they've been unkind before. Well, no. So I think with this type of agreement, you really have to, is it a bullying situation or not? I think these type of agreements work best when there's been a couple of issues and there's been a falling out. I think when it gets to the bullying stage, these kind of agreements are a little bit more difficult to get parents on board with, especially if the child has been the victim of bullying. So they're not always on board with it, and then you have to find a different avenue. But I can also really understand that because the child has been the victim. So we really choose carefully who we choose to do these types of agreements with. If it was a bullying situation that was at a high level, then it would have already gone to Leonie as lead pastoral, Miss Al-Qadi, who's our head of secondary, and that really then would be looking at maybe that student who's been the bully taking a bit of a time out. But again, the most important thing is that we keep the lines of communication open with our parents, so they are informed every step of the way, and that they feel comfortable and confident enough to say, this actually isn't going to work for me, and then we just take a different path. And we have to be open to that as grade leaders.
Yeah, we've also got a very clear policy and structure that we follow in the school, and we need our parents to be on board with it. And if there was ever a parent who was not on board with the way that we do things here in JPS, then we would sit down and maybe have a discussion that maybe this isn't the right place for your child to develop the best way, because you need to have the same goals, you need to have the same outcomes. And if the parents are not agreeing with the way that we do things here, then we do have that discussion that maybe this isn't the best fit for the parties involved.
Yeah, thank you. We have a follow-up question here. What would you do when parents are in denial and refuse that their child is a bully or being bullied?
Yeah, we have a lot of these situations.
Yeah.
We really do. And actually, sometimes when we get the parents in, say, for example, we show them the hard evidence, if we have screenshots and this, they're actually so shocked because a lot of the child that they get at home might be yes sir, no sir, And then when we get, you know, when they're in school, they're just like, they're allowed to have this bit more freedom, and the parents are actually shocked that they can show these behaviours because they're so well behaved at home. So I think a lot of the time when we show them the evidence, or we get them some sort of different perspectives of it, we do see it, but sometimes it's like when they're on the phone, they're like, no, my child would never be like this way, and etc., etc. And then when we bring them into a meeting, they listen to all sides of the story. They've had time to process the information that we've given them. We do get them coming around a lot of the time, but it is a long process, because of course, if you're a parent, you want to think the best of your child. Every single person does.
Yeah, and as grade leaders, it can be a really hard conversation, and it can be really daunting, and it's difficult to go into those conversations. And I think, again, it's just really important that you have a clear, if you have a student who you think is bullying somebody, you need to have all of your paperwork lined up. You need to make sure that you have your evidence. You need to keep track of that student. We're a school that tracks everything. We have a system online that we go on. If there's an incident, we log it. And then we pull all of that data. So if we're having to sit in front of a parent and have this really difficult conversation, we're making sure that we've got everything that we need to have it. And I think that's really important as well.
Indeed, I totally agree. Just to end on a more sort of positive note, you know, when it comes to compassion and tolerance, you know, if you know, people often say building from within, you know. We have a question here regarding suggesting some practical tips to help kids be more compassionate. What are the ways to promote compassion in the classroom? Somebody's provocatively said, can empathy or compassion be taught, or should it come from within solely? What are your thoughts on compassion?
I think that it can be role modeled. Like for me, every action that I take as a teacher in school, I know that there are at least 50 eyes watching, because the students are around. So if they see me showing compassion to another student that is upset, then that's role modeling that behaviour. And there's a really interesting study, and I can't remember the name of it, but it actually says that children learn from other people's behaviours. You know, the most that they learn from is the people that they see as role models. So yeah, for me, it's making sure that my actions are positive, that my actions are showing empathy, and that the students can see that, and being able as a teacher as well to kind of go, I was wrong. I had a situation a couple of weeks ago, this student, you know, the class was being really difficult. This one student said something and I was like, why are you doing that? And then at the end of the lesson, I thought, I've just said that to her, but actually it was the whole class. And at the end of the lesson, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I feel like maybe the whole class, that was a tough class, and I singled you out, and that was wrong of me. And she was like, Miss, thank you so much for apologising. So I think it's also as teachers being able to say, you know, have those conversations and be a little bit vulnerable about maybe if we've made a mistake as well.
Ladies, I want to say a big thank you.
Thank you.
Celebrating the UE National Bullying Prevention Week. It's been wonderful. Your presentation has been fantastic. Your answers as well. And please stay on menti.com for the last couple of minutes here. I just wish for share my screen. If you could all please just keep on menti.com. 1 second here. And if you could please answer this next question here. Just simple overall, how satisfied were you with today's presentation, with the content and the structure and the presenters' preparedness? We'd be grateful for those answers. And if you can all see the Menti code in the chat as well, I believe. Is it visible in the chat? No? Yes? Ladies, can you see it? I'll read it out otherwise.
Let me just check.
Yeah. So the code is 72815034, and we'd be grateful if you could all also answer this last question. What has been the main takeaway from today's webinar? What has been the main takeaway from today's webinar? For those of you who are still left, we'd be grateful if you could answer that. We'll share some of these answers. I understand that a few of you have left since we passed the hour, but grateful for these answers. Introducing something like the 4 R's into our school, fantastic. The 4 R's. Ladies, would you like to repeat what the 4 R's were again?
Yeah, of course. Responsibility, respect, resilience, and resourcefulness.
Wonderful, wonderful. Leon and Ashley were great, very informative. Thank you. Absolutely, ladies were fantastic. What was the process when you came up with these 4 R's? Was that it was a joint thing when school started initially, or it took a couple of years before you decided, or?
Actually, last year I decided to create a working group with the staff of the school that was going to look at how we could make character education, how we could make sure that our students and staff really understood it. Yeah. And the working group was around, I think there was 6 of us, and we took everything to do with the school, the ethos, the mission, the moral education virtues, the building blocks of character, and we created a big map, and we said, we have all of these things, how can we reduce them to give our students something simpler to understand? And from all of that, we looked at the Jubilee Centre's building blocks of character, and we created the 4 R's. And that's really then had such an impact on the school in terms of we are looking to change our mission to actually represent the 4 R's even more.
Wonderful, wonderful. I've stopped sharing that screen. I want to say a big thank you to all of you. We do encourage you to go on to New Days, New Ways for, as usual, to find the library of previous webinars. We will also let you know that the 6th of December, we will host a new webinar celebrating Expo 2020. So we do encourage you to log on to that. The details will come shortly on all of our social media pages. But otherwise, I want to say a big thank you to Ashley and T. Leone for their presentation. And I'm going to say a big thank you to all of you, the audience, for participating today. So from all of us here at KHDA, I want to say a big thank you. Bye-bye.